All right, we are live.
We are live, and I'll hand it off to you, Michaela, in a second. Today we're going to talk about teams. We're going to do a teams Q&A, question and answer session, and we're going to try to keep this to 30 minutes. I know that's a lot to cram in. We probably go like 2 hours with teams, right, Michaela?
Absolutely. As you said, it's one big platform.
Nice, nice. All right, so go ahead and I'll hand it off to you, and Chris and I will pepper you with some questions, and I know you'll have the answers, and that's what you're on the call for.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Brian. So I'm back here again today with Resolve, and I'm really excited to talk about teams. Last time we were together, we discussed SharePoint and went pretty far with what we could do and discussed that. SharePoint is an all-in-one collaboration tool, but that's only just meeting one piece of the puzzle that exists within the Microsoft suite. So today we're going to talk about that connectivity that exists within Teams and how this really all ties together. So I wanted to start off by just bringing us back to this look and feel of a SharePoint landing page. Specifically, what we're looking at right now is a Viva configuration. And what we'll notice is that we have all of these individual virtual office sections for our typical day-to-day workflow that we'd be using. And one of our key tiles here is going to be Teams, which I actually have opened in another tab to the right up here. So we're going to jump in there and just start taking a look at how all of these things really tie together. So I'm going to hop into Teams here, and right now I'm just in the view of scheduling an actual meeting. But what I'm going to do, we're going to come over to this in a minute. I'm going to hop over to the actual Teams section of Teams. I know that sounds super redundant. And we'll notice that we have a whole structure that's living under here that's actually corresponding to our SharePoint sites that exist within our tenant. And as we may have discussed in our previous call regarding SharePoint, when you set up an initial SharePoint team site, you'll be prompted to actually create a team associated with that site for file sharing, collaboration, to really bring together the staff to be able to chat with each other, schedule meetings, have video calls, and really have that in the office feel, whether you're working remotely or hybrid. So what we're looking at right here, as I said, is we're going to look at some teams and channels and just discuss a little bit of the differences between, what is a team, what is a channel, and when's the best use case for either one. So a team in itself is going to encompass all of the members of either a SharePoint site, if you've set your permissions there, or really just the entire staff that you've added to that specific team. Now, channels, alternatively, are definitely a sub of a team. However, they're more streamlined for streamlined communication. So let's say, for example, you have a retail team where your whole retail staff is going to be located and living in here. But we have some other channels that exist under here as well, right? So we might have some people on the retail team that are specifically dedicated to sales. They might be dedicated to retail marketing, or they might be dedicated to just a specific project that lives with under that retail umbrella. So the best case scenario for really utilizing channels, again, is just to streamline specific communications on a specific project. And it's really as configurable as you want it to be. In our organization, we have multiple teams that contain everybody within that given staff group. However, we have sub-channels that include specific project topics, but we also have what's called a private channel for maybe those C-level staff members that are solely supposed to be communicating about specific things. And private channels, again, are different from a public channel. And before I continue, on and on and on here, as Brian had said, we could go on for hours about Teams and all the awesome capabilities with it. Just a quick difference between a public and a private channel. By default, when you create additional channels within the Teams environment, all the members of that team are going to have access into that channel. So if you do not want that to happen and you'd like to set something up that's more private with permissions, you'd want to create a private channel. Now, before I keep going on and on, Brian and Chris, what else kind of questions are we going to go over here today?
So, one of the big ones that a lot of people, ask frequently are, troubleshooting their camera, their microphone, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really good point. So I'm going to do something really quick and you're going to laugh because I'm going to pull your faces onto my screen. So you're going to have like an
Okay.
inception moment here. So I'm going to pull my screen over here and you can see what we're seeing here is we have a lot of different controls on what we like to call the ribbon. So this is your ribbon of controls. If you're ever experiencing issues with camera and video troubleshooting, it happens a lot when we see people switching between different platforms. So if you're a Zoom user, but you have to join a Teams meeting for whatever reason it may be, always check your camera and audio settings. And the way that you're going to want to do that is by choosing your more options, or three little dots, as I like to call them in Microsoft land, because that's where they hide absolutely everything, whether we're in SharePoint, whether we're in Teams. And what we're going to want to check under these three little dots is going to be our device settings. Now, our device settings is going to open up a screen that's going to show us what we're utilizing. If you do have an additional microphone or camera or webcam that you plug in to use, you will see that you have the option as custom setup there for you configured. So I have a custom setup for my audio, so that's why that says that here for me. If I had another option here as well, we have the PC mic and speakers. Of course, if you have Mac mic and speakers. But you just want to make sure that you see these settings here are enabled, that your speaker is on, that your mic is on. And then, of course, you have the options within your video settings as well to adjust your brightness automatically. Enable things like soft focus because everybody loves a filter these days. So now we have filters in Teams. And we also have noise suppression. Noise suppression is really good. If you're working remotely, you might be in a noisy environment. Or even if you're in the office and you're sharing a cubicle with somebody else, it's always great to enable noise suppression so that the only thing that you can hear crisp and clear is going to be your audio and then the audio that's coming through from the other end. So always check the device settings. And again, that's going to be under the more within the Teams window. You're going to choose your device settings, and then this window will fly out for you to configure that there.
So do you know if it does it, like I think Discord, for example, uses something called Chris for voice? Is that does Teams specify what they use with that?
I think it's actually a very similar specific software.
Okay.
I've never actually read too far into it. I'll take a look at that and we can circle back on it. I wouldn't be surprised if it was the same. I'm almost positive it might be Crisp.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, so we got some other questions to go over here too. So when to use Teams versus a channel? We touched on this just a little bit. Again, Teams are going to be a little bit more for group communication. So let's say company-wide announcements. So one thing I do want to go back to that we discussed last time as well is that whenever you attach a team to a SharePoint site, what's this general channel is automatically added. And the reason being for that is it's really meant for general communication. So if you set up a Teams-wide meeting for everybody, as we can see, we have this all-team weekly sync that occurs every Friday at 3:30 p.m. That's going to notify everybody on the team, add that to all of the team members' calendars. And in addition to that separation, it's also going to allow for them to share files within the general channel quickly without actually impeding on their additional file structure in SharePoint, right? Because we discussed how those two are connected. So the general channel is going to store any images that were shared, any files that were shared, but it's going to keep it separate from your concrete file structure that you have enabled, right? Because your files are, again, going to be available for you in SharePoint and in the Teams interface if you have that connectivity created. So I'm just going to hop into the files section here just to show you what that looks like. Where we're going to default into, because we're in the general channel, is going to be the general folder. So I can see here, these are all of the documents that have ever been shared or set up within that general channel. And the reason being for that is this was stuff that was sent back and forth between the team, and it wasn't necessarily uploaded to their root document structure. So it's not impeding on any of their CAD files or their Hyper-V files. It just segregates it and puts the general documents into the general area. So if you're an organization that's migrating to the SharePoint and you're concerned and wondering, what is this general channel? Don't worry, it's just so everything within your root file structure does not get bogged down with loose documents as your team begins to utilize their channels and their teams moving forward. So it does a really good job of separating all of that information as well.
Question for you, Michaela.
Mhm.
Do you recommend that clients clean out the general folder from time to time, or just leave everything in there?
It really depends on the organization and what they could be sharing. And most of the time, I would say no. And what we would recommend instead would be things like retention labels. So what we could do from there is for, let's say we're dealing with a client that is sharing data that might be HIPAA sensitive. What we would want to do in that case is, of course, special case scenario. They're adhering to compliance regulations. We'd want to enable a lot of data loss prevention as well as retention labels on specific documents for them to initiate a deletion or an archive once a document reaches a certain age to achieve that. So it really removes the need for someone to have to manually come in here and clean anything out. So just alternatively to just manually deleting, we'd want to have that enabled in the back end within the admin center. With rules and tags stating that, you know, if a document reaches a 5-year age, it's automatically going to get deleted or it's going to get moved to archive. Same thing, you know, it's not limited to 573. We could do that after 30 days. We could do a forever keep label as well. So for example, if you never wanted to lose any data within a particular folder, we could just go ahead and apply that forever keep label onto it with unlimited retention. So a lot of different ways that we could achieve that.
So I'm sure some folks that watch this video would have questions in terms of licensing, and the labels and retention is, does that come with even the most basic packages?
No, so retention labeling and getting into data loss prevention is going to require a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license. And we always say, really, we don't get benefits from selling Microsoft licensing, right? It truly is the all-inclusive package for a basic small to medium-sized business, and even some organizations that are adhering to some regulatory compliance, because there are some add-on services that we can tack on to that to achieve the most appropriate compliance that we possibly can. But with the Microsoft Business Premium, you are getting everything within the Microsoft umbrella, plus data loss prevention, plus Defender for Microsoft 365, which previously you were not. That had to be an add-on license. It is now included. You're also getting Defender for Office 365, which is protecting your email from anti-phish, anti-malware, anti-spam, safe links, and safe attachments. So having things like that enabled and just doing it with an all-in-one license that I believe is costing $22 per user per month. It's very easy to get everything done in one swoop rather than having to outsource to third party and pay for additional services there.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so I know we were talking a little bit too about, you know, integrations with some applications that exist within the Teams environment as well. So it really is, you know, the world is sort of your oyster, and that can almost seem very overwhelming with a platform like this because there are so many tools and there are so many plugins. But if we'll notice, I'm just going to hop quickly back over to my landing page here and just take a look at some of these tools that are included. So we do have, you know, the insights, that's super awesome. But one of the cool features that we utilize within most organizations, and when we get them set up with an environment, an intranet, if you will, like this, is going to be a tasks feature. So we get a lot of questions about organizations that utilize things like Microsoft Planner or Microsoft To Do, which is a function of Planner. Like, how can I have this included within my environment, and how does this really work? So you can take from the top of a specific team or a channel, you can pin any additional, I believe what they call them are tabs within the specific environment. So if you're utilizing a specific application, if you just want the SharePoint site for this team embedded in here, so you don't have to leave and go to the SharePoint online version, you can absolutely do that too. One thing I do want to call attention to here is going to be this all teams task piece, because we were talking about that task functionality, and having a tasks associated with a team is really an awesome thing for a multitude of reasons. One, it makes it very easy to come in here and quickly grab a team member's attention to assign them a particular task that they may need to complete by a specific date. And there's also ways that they can then go ahead and add those events to their calendars and just create notifications for themselves moving forward to stay on track. So this just gives another visualization. It's just another way to avoid having to open up another tab within the web or having to open up another application on your desktop. You truly can function solely within the Teams platform and interface if you choose to do so. And that's really what Microsoft 365 is all about, is enabling people to work the way that they choose to work. So if you're a person that wants an all-inclusive, one place to work, Teams is really the platform for you. And it is super configurable to the needs of a specific organization and customer. So as we can see in here, if I just click into one of these examples, you have the full-fledged task functionality located directly into the Teams. You have the ability to assign tasks to a specific user, and then that's going to get added to them as a specific thing that they need to complete. We can group things into buckets. We can label progress, give them start dates and end dates, give them notes and direct links to what they need to do and follow up with, even include attachments and comments to go back and forth with one another to assure that this is all being completed. So you really don't have to leave this environment to go ahead and do what else you need to do within your daily workflow. And of course, there's a lot of different functionality we could go on and on about within the Teams interface that allows you to do other things. So for example, if I notice that this was past a deadline and I'm a manager and I'm just viewing our all team tasks, I could simply copy the link to this task, hop into my chat, for example, and shoot this off to Adele and Joanna if they were responsible for completing this, and just send the link to them and say, please complete this. But now they're able to open that up directly and see exactly where they were leaving off and what they may have missed to just complete that as quick as possible. So it's really bringing together core communication of an organization and just really speeding up the overall workflow without having to bog yourself down going to a multitude of different places all at once to achieve what you need to do in a day.
Yeah, that's great. That's excellent. I mean, I was just thinking, how we're using email less and less.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a place for email. It's still a critical part of communication, just like the phone. But it's nice sometimes to just use the chat function. So
absolutely, and it's just so much easier to reach people utilizing that chat function. And the beauty of it is, you can chat with individuals, you can chat with groups, you can chat externally. So if you are working with people outside of your organization and you just quickly need to reach them, you can enter in their email address and chat with them, and they will be able to receive that message as well. One thing, since we did bring up email, I just kind of want to point out here as well before I start moving away from chat. It's going to be this little avatar in the upper right that represents who we are. And as we know, Megan is my alias, so to speak, in the demo tenant here. So because Megan's calendar right now says that she's in a meeting, this notification and this status message will be available to anybody who chats her, anybody who tries to call her, and they actually won't be able to disrupt her because she's in a meeting. And that applies to both Teams and Outlook. As we had just mentioned, email, all of this is really tying in together. So what does it mean to have an in a meeting status message? It means that if someone were to send out an additional Teams meeting to her and expect her to hop in there, her calendar is going to intelligently respect the fact that she's already taken for that time and she can't have a meeting during that time. And Outlook would actually recommend times Megan is available based off of her Teams calendar, because Outlook and Teams calendars work hand in hand with each other. And I'll hop over to the Outlook application in just a second just to take a look at that calendar view. But what we'll see is that all of the events that are on the Teams calendar are also going to show up on the Outlook calendar for us as well. Now, in addition to the in a meeting status message, of course, you can manually set your status unless you are actually presenting. So for example, right now, I'm in my Teams desktop on my actual account here, and it says that I'm presenting, and I'm actually automatically set to the do not disturb status. And the reason for that is because if I received a phone call right now, that would be incredibly distracting. All of my messages that I receive during the time that I'm screen sharing and presenting on my screen are going to be silenced. So I can follow up on them afterward, but I'm not going to have notifications popping up in the lower right-hand corner, distracting the people I'm presenting to, and vice versa. So there's a lot of different ways to configure these status messages. And just in addition to that, it's all going to carry over to your Outlook calendar. So whether you're in Do Not Disturb within Teams or Outlook, your emails are going to be silenced during that time period as well. And then you can return to them when you're no longer on screen the way that we are now.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, exactly. It's another way to help you really focus. And a lot of people say, how is it that, your productivity goes up so much when you're working online? It must be so difficult. And I'm like, no, the intelligence that's built into all of these applications really thought it through, how it would be as a human to be working day to day and what would help to suppress all that distraction. So there are a lot of really awesome tools that are already built in here for us just to assist with our workflow and staying on track. Now I'm going to hop over just to the Outlook calendar here just to give you an idea of what this looks like. So again, what we're seeing here is I have a few more calendars displayed within Outlook, which is also a really cool feature. We can definitely do an Outlook call at some point as well. But what I'll see if I check off things like landing team here is it's going to show all of the meetings that I have that would also be on my team's calendar, plus my additional group calendars that I want to have insight into. So if I'm a manager and I need to know where everybody is at all times, I'm not going to get personal with their information. However, I need to know whether they can meet or if they cannot meet. So I want to see and have insight into all of the times that they may be unavailable. So I can see my own events in here, and then I have color coding for other events that might exist within the calendar as well that could have respect to me or could have respect to my staff. Now, just to show you configuring an event within Outlook, and just utilizing that like scheduling assistant feature as well. I could come in here, for example, and I say I want Lynn on this call. I could see that Lynn is busy during the time frame that's set here for me. And this is what that beauty of respect of that team's calendar has for those meetings that are already existing on your calendar. My scheduling assistant within Outlook is already telling me, I'm sorry, but Lynn is unavailable during that time. And alternatively, if I was to click done, what's going to happen is I'm not respecting her calendar based off of that, but automatically there's going to be suggested times that are pulled in for me to actually go ahead and schedule that meeting for when we're both available, because that's able to read into our team's calendars and our Outlook calendars within our organization. So it's always going to know when the best possible time is there for us to meet with each other, unless, of course, we manually blocked our calendars. Now, as you change the time frame that you'd like to meet, maybe you need a 2-hour meeting, maybe you need a 1-hour meeting, we're going to see that this time frame is going to flex. So if I have specific days that I want to meet, and I can just shimmy this around until I find something that works for everybody. So now I can see it's suggesting an hour-long meeting with different dates versus when I was just looking for a 30-minute meeting here. And of course, what we'll see here is that it's already configured for us to have a Teams meeting attached to this. If I did not want to have a Teams meeting, but just wanted an event on the calendar, I would flip this toggle off, or else automatically a Teams meeting link is going to be associated with this calendar event, and we'll ask Lynn and the sender to join at that given time when we schedule that meeting. Awesome. So that point, I think we got. Let's jump back over to Teams and just look at some of the other points that we have in here as well. So one thing we did have some questions on specifically is, what other applications, can we have within the Teams platform? I think we briefly touched on this, but really almost anything under the sun, there's probably a plugin for it within Teams. So we talked a little bit about, being within a team or even a chat and having the ability to add tabs to the top of a particular channel, just to really streamline the experience more and more. But what we can also do is add applications to our navigation bar on the left-hand side. So if I'm somebody who utilizes something like Asana I could come in here and add an application here directly for Asana. I've actually been asked about this quite a bit for people who are switching from Asana over to the Teams and they just aren't comfortable with it yet. So there's a lot of different plugins in here that are available for you. And if it's not something that you're seeing within the Teams environment, I would definitely talk to your provider and see what they can do for you, because within the Microsoft Suite, if you're on that business premium licensing, you have the ability to have mobile application management and just device management in general for your application. So we could push down what's called an MSI file for a particular application that you're looking to have and include that within your environment as well. So there's a lot of different ways that we can make that happen. Before I keep going on and on, Brian, any questions left over that we want to really hit on here?
So I wanted to distinguish between the live events versus webinar versus meeting. I don't know if you can do that quickly.
Sure, absolutely. Let's get to it. So when you're on a calendar view, and again, we're sort of just navigating down our navigation bar here, we'll see that in the upper right-hand corner, we have this option, meet now, new meeting, and then a drop down. So your options are going to be schedule a meeting, which would be just kind of looking at that view we had in Outlook, identical to that, adding your users, creating a title. Then there's webinar. So webinar is going to be designed a little bit differently here. This configuration itself is going to look exactly the same. But what we're going to have that's a difference here is that this link here pops up indicating that we're automatically created a registration form. So if you are looking to host an event where you have attendees coming in externally, this could be for sales, this could be for brand awareness, this really could be for anything, you're actually given a registration link that's created automatically by Teams when you select the webinar option that's associated with that specific meeting link. And what we'll see when we get in here is that it's going to ask you for some basic information, but it's also going to ask you to configure, you know, the different kinds of fields that you want included. So you can personalize this and brand it up. You can add an image for your brand. You give your event details here, a description. You can actually add speakers. So if me and Brian were doing a webinar here, I could go ahead and add us in, add bios for us. And then automatically you're given first, last name, email. But if you're missing something and you want some more information from a particular organization or person that's signing up, you can add in any of these options as well as custom questions with an open text field to ask whatever you would like for them to go ahead and register. And then it's going to ask you whether or not that needs to be required or if it's optional. Most of the time I say just do first, last, and email. However, if you require more information and you're flowing this information into something like a CRM, it's always helpful to have as much information about the user as possible. So really just scheduling a normal meeting is going to be between you and the recipients, whereas the webinar itself is designed more for a live event format, where you'd be having attendees register for it. They're then sent a link after registration to add that to their calendars and join on the date that it's occurring. And then live events, it's a newer feature. We're not going to go too deep into the live event versus webinar because right now it's very similar in the way that you sign up for them and register. However, a live event is more so designed for larger organizations and larger events that could be going on virtually, whereas a webinar is really going to have the ability to have co-presenters as well as just really sharing information and not necessarily like streaming. I would call a live event more like streaming.
Sort of like a YouTube live type of thing.
Funny you say that. So there is a plugin right now. I wouldn't say try it because right now it requires some PowerShell, but there is a plugin that's actually coming for people who do utilize the YouTube platform and even marketers like myself, where you'll be able to stream those live events directly from Teams up to your YouTube channel, which is really awesome.
Cool, cool, nice. All right, that's good. Good explanation.
Mm-hmm.
So in the interest of time, we're going to cut this one right here, and then I think we'll end up at some point doing a Teams 2 presentation, and maybe after that a Teams 3, because there's just so much information here. But and we want to get you on to do the virtual desktops, the VDI stuff at some point, and talk about that a little bit. So, so we're going to close this one up, and thanks for the, answering our questions and just pushing out the information to, so people can better utilize the suite.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to doing this again.
All right, great. Thank you,
Bye.
Michaela.
Absolutely. Bye.